All right. So, Akshay, thanks for joining us. We're going to get started here. What we wanted to do was bring you on so that we could talk a little bit about some research that we published a month ago, which was to focus on a fan behavior that we call showing up. At the Sports Innovation Lab, we say very often that you can't just talk about fan engagement because fan engagement means everything and nothing. So you have to focus on fan behaviors to design for an optimal or breakthrough fan experience. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was unpack the whole experience, the fan journey of showing up at a live venue for a sporting or media event. And I think that one of the things that you can see when you see the research that we put out is that StubHub has been focused on the fan journey from driveway to the gate for a long time, and you've done a lot of innovation even after the gate to sort of change the fan experience. So we wanted to bring you on, have you introduce yourself, a little bit about your role at StubHub, and then let's dive into the research a little bit and talk about that fan journey and some of the partnerships and experiences that you guys work on at StubHub to improve what fans experience at live sporting events.
Perfect. Josh, Molly, thank you so much for having me. First and foremost, pleasure to be here. So I've been at StubHub now for almost 3 years. I started out in a partnerships role, and we'll talk about how critical partnerships are to the StubHub ecosystem and to our ability to take part not only in the fan engagement, but to take part in the process of fans showing up at live events. That is the crux of what we do. Our reason to exist is to ensure that we can bring the joy of live to fans globally in a seamless and friction-free manner, which is not how it used to be prior to StubHub and prior to the many businesses that have popped up over the last 20 years that explicitly serve that goal. So I joined in a partnerships role 3 years ago, focused on the NFL, NBA, and NHL. Over the course of the last 3 years, I've now moved into more of an operational role, to the point where I now run our North America business, which is the bulk, 90+% of our overall business was a $5 billion gross transaction volume business into 2019. Obviously, we've been severely impacted, as so many businesses in the sports media live event space have, by COVID-19. Prior to this pandemic and during it, we have worked diligently, creatively to ensure that our fans and our buyers and our sellers, we are a two-sided marketplace. We serve our buyers and our sellers equally to make sure that they have the most seamless experience when transacting live events tickets. That is the singular focus of who we are, what we do, and what our goal is.
And I think it's relevant just personally for you to touch on briefly your background before StubHub, because you had a lot of experience on the property side, and maybe just even juxtaposing, what you work on now and what you did when you were with the Sixers. Can you tell everybody a little bit about what you focused on in Philadelphia?
Absolutely. So a little bit about me. So I went to Middlebury College, obviously, as Josh and I were talking about earlier. Spent 4 years working in private equity, went to business school at Penn, and then coming out of business school, knew that I wanted to work in the sports media and entertainment space, knew that I wanted to be on the team side just to get as close to the product as possible, right? Teams, at the end of the day, teams are as close to the product on the field, on the court, on the ice. I knew I was never going to be a professional athlete, so this was the second best opportunity to do that. And I was fortunate enough to run the business strategy group for Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment, which is the umbrella organization that owns and manages and operates the Philadelphia 76ers, the New Jersey Devils, Crystal Palace in the English Premier League, and a handful of other sports media and entertainment assets, including an esports franchise and a business incubator. During my 2.5, almost 3 years with Harris Blitzer, I focused on everything from acquisitions that the organization made. At the time that I started as an intern during business school, the umbrella org was just the Sixers, and now has grown to include all of the properties that I mentioned before. Coming from a background in transactions and in investing and acquiring assets, it was a good fit for what the parent organization was looking to do and the way in which they've expanded. But then also focused on unique one-off partnerships deals like the ones that the Sixers had with StubHub, which is how I got introduced to StubHub, as well as setting up entities that were just a little bit different than sports teams had historically done. So the Sixers were the first sports team to launch a business incubator, which is now known as the Sixers Innovation Lab, which does exactly what you would think. They incubate, invest in, and help grow businesses that are in some tangential way related to the business of sports, and the business of media and the business of consumer brands. And that was the background that I brought to StubHub, which I think has really helped me in many ways understand the consumer journey, understand sports fandom and entertainment fandom, because not only was it a sports property, Hair Splitzer Sports and Entertainment also operates and owns the Prudential Center, which is one of the busiest buildings in the country. And that gave me great insight into the music and theater landscape, and how different fandom and engagement is there than it is in sports. And so a lot of great lessons that have, I would like to believe, held me in good stead as I've transitioned from the property side to sort of the brand side over the course of my 3 years here.
And all that experience really does keep coming back to the idea of frictionless. You know, it's a term that the industry uses quite a bit to make sure that people can buy a ticket, get to the stadium, get in their seat, and start enjoying the live entertainment without having to worry about a lot of the logistics and the hassles. We all know that despite our focus on trying to make that a seamless experience, there's a lot of really big challenges that the industry needs to accomplish. And buying a ticket, getting a preloaded mobile wallet, showing up at a gate and getting pre-screened from security now. And this was one of the reasons why we really focused on Show Up as a behavior we needed to really tackle. COVID has even made it more difficult in the near future for fans to get through that process, right? So if it wasn't hard enough to, get into the traffic and get through the traffic and get through the queue and get into the stadium, now you have all these other potential, checkpoints that you need to cross before you get into the venue and feel safe to enjoy entertainment. Take a step back. Let's not talk about COVID right now. Let's talk about why you guys showed up so strongly in our research from last year, because this was pre-pandemic. This was the idea that, StubHub seemed to have an understanding of what's on the screen right now, which is that there's game time, and then there's this expanded revenue opportunity for partnerships to be formed and created, and the experience to expand beyond, tip-off or, the puck dropping or whatever it is. And the time when the clock expires, there's an opportunity to reach the fan before the event and after the event and create a longer, conversation with them. And that's something I think everybody aspires to do. And when we looked at our research, again, it was really interesting to see how StubHub and a lot of payment companies sort of showed up as an opportunity to coordinate, orchestrate, facilitate that entire experience. Does that strike you as right, or are you surprised by the fact that there aren't more of the hospitality vendors here, that there are other brands that showed up, but that these are the kind of companies that would really take a primary role in making sure that that fan experience is good enough that they'll show up at the venue?
So first and foremost, I'm thrilled to see our brand there, because any brand that is involved in facilitating a seamless experience at a live event aspires to be on a chart similar to this. So the fact that we are showing up in consumer surveys and the fact that we are top of mind for our fans, our buyers, our sellers is fantastic for us to see, and makes me very proud to work at a brand that inspires that kind of that inspires that kind of support from our core constituents. Look, I think 20 years ago, slightly longer than that, one could argue that there were few experiences that created as much of an emotional high as attending a live event, potentially particularly sports, because sports have been a generational backbone of American society in many ways. Your dad or mom was a fan of a certain team, their mom or dad was a fan of a certain team. That fandom gets passed down in a really unique manner. And so there were few events that could inspire emotion and inspire fandom the way that a live event in sports could. And there were few things that were more painful and more upsetting and more of a downer than the process of actually getting into said live event, right? Scalping was incredibly prevalent, and you would go and you would buy, if you were not fortunate enough to have a season ticket or to have an in with a team or with a venue, you would show up and you would buy a ticket from a guy who was standing in the corner, and you would hope for the best. And oftentimes that ticket would not scan because it was fraudulent. And that feeling, that process of taking your kids or your friends or your significant other or your parents, paying all this money, getting so hyped up for what should and could be such an incredible experience and multi-hour experience that would create memories for a lifetime, would be shrouded in misery because you would show up and it would just be this painful process. And StubHub was created to bring that process from the darkness into the light, right? And so we are ultimately a marketplace whose backbone is the technology that validates and ensures that fans have a seamless experience, whether they are buying or selling tickets. And while that sounds incredibly basic, the fact of the matter is 20 years ago or even 15 years ago, this was revolutionary and transformed how people approached the process of attending a live event. Now, that at its core is the ethos upon which this brand is built, but then there are so many additional features that we have tried to create to further improve the experience that our buyers and sellers have. And I think those are the features, those are the bells and whistles, those are the added benefits that we have been able to provide that I think vault us into this list of brands that fans think of when they think about showing up, when they think about being there. And those range from the price alerts that we allow fans to set so that they know exactly when a ticket is in their price point in the venue and in the seating area that they want to sit in, to the way in which we merchandise our website and target our fans and show them content that is not just the same content that you would see in Boston as I would see in San Francisco, as someone would see in New York, but is specifically catered to your preferences and to your indicated choices of the kinds of events that you like to attend. To our partnerships with content rights holders that allow us to be front of mind when a fan attends a live event. So we show up in venue, on the website, show up as the integrated sponsored partner of the teams and the properties that are ultimately responsible for the joy that this live event brings. These, I think, are the additional features that sit on the backbone of the fan guarantee and the security away from fraud, away from that painful, friction-filled experience that I think help us have our brand, top of mind when your folks are going out and surveying people on which brands they think enable people to show up.
And so let's talk specifically about this chart, because I think what it is in terms of your philosophy about partnership is really where this all kind of rubber meets the road. When Sports Innovation Lab puts one of these out, we really measure two things. One is the y-axis. I should be doing this when I say y-axis, not this. Y-axis, which is your market validation. And this is your NFL, Major League Baseball, all the partnerships that you have. So I want to talk a little bit about how you approach your partnerships with the properties, how you collaborate with your property partners to make sure that you're catering to the unique experience that a baseball fan has to a Crystal Palace Premier League fan has. How do you really work with those kinds of different properties based on where you are operating around the world? And then on the x-axis is what Molly really keeps track of, all the different things you just mentioned, which is the innovation that you add, whether it's pricing alerts, whether it's APIs, SDKs, integrations, mobile apps, things that facilitate parking, facilitate any sort of transportation or even content partnership, right? That could create a unique experience. So when you look at this chart, what it really says is StubHub has done a fantastic job innovating and focusing on the technology that matters, because you're pretty far to the right, and you have a really strong position from a market validation in the industry. And that puts you up in, with Visa and Ticketmaster and Alipay and like these companies that are global, that have very strong foundations and platforms. How does that sort of pressurize what you do next, where you think about what new properties to work with or what new venues to work with or what new technology to build?
Look, I think, again, I appreciate that the people that you surveyed put us in this tier, and I'm grateful that whether it's people who've bought or sold on our platform or people who have heard of StubHub and never transacted there, which I highly encourage them to do once live events come back. I appreciate and I am grateful for the fact that they put us in that echelon of brands. I think it is accurate that each one of these two factors without the other is substantially less valuable. So let's start talking about the market validation. I think one of the things, and we've danced around this, but I think one of the things that really separates StubHub not just from other ticketing companies, but really in many ways from other e-commerce organizations is the value of the partnerships in the way in which we work hand in hand with the critical partners in our space. When StubHub started, most content rights holders would have told you that they looked at StubHub as some combination of enemy and large question mark, right? There was a question mark on what this brand would do to a team's revenues, what it would do to a team's fans, a venue's fans. And I am incredibly proud of the way, and obviously I can take little to no credit for this because I've not been at the company for 20 years, but I am incredibly proud in the way in which generations of StubHub employees have worked with content rights holders to completely revolutionize how we are thought of within the industry, where now most teams, venues, leagues consider us partners. We are partners of Major League Baseball, where we are the sole official ticketing marketplace of Major League Baseball. We are partners with the vast majority of Power 5 schools, where we are the sole ticketing marketplace of a ton of schools across the spectrum of Power 5 conferences. We are partners with the NFL, where we are one of 3 official partners that the NFL has in terms of ticketing partners that they work with. That brings with it not only a brand and market validation, but also from an operational nous perspective, it allows us to work with these partners if and when there are crises like this pandemic, or if and when there are opportunities to grow both of our businesses together. And so that market validation, those opportunities that have come about as a result of these partnerships are incredibly valuable and have been the driver for our renewing partnerships with these content rights holders. I think the technological aspect of it is certainly something that we have continued to focus on. You know, we in many ways led the revolution of ticketing to mobile. Our app really we have seen significant growth of transactions on our app and our mWeb experience over the course of the last few years, as people have moved away from simply opening a browser on their desktop to buy tickets to buying later in the event cycle, and oftentimes standing in front of the arena and buying a ticket to go in at that moment. And as we talked about, there have been several features that we have invested in, things like Sell It Now, which allow sellers, consumer sellers largely, to potentially sell their ticket now to StubHub, as opposed to waiting to see if and when a buyer may come and transact with them. Things like becoming the first marketplace to launch a multi-item cart, where you can buy not just tickets to multiple events of the same sports team or the same artist, but mix and match in a single transaction. 2 things like our sell flow, which makes it incredibly easy. On mobile, it's down to 3 clicks to list your tickets and sell them on the app. These are features that we have had to invest in, because if we didn't, we would be left behind by an industry that is constantly innovating, and because we have seen the demographic of our buyers and our sellers change, right? That demographic is getting younger. They are getting more mobile savvy. they are getting more technologically savvy. And if we don't meet them where they are, we will no longer be that leading brand. We will no longer be in the top right quadrant of the chart that you guys have put together. And so we're aware that we need to constantly maintain that market validation through our partnerships and through the number of things that we do to be official partners with these leagues. At the same time, we know it's incredibly important to invest behind the technological aspect of this to make sure that today's 15-year-olds, tomorrow's 25-year-olds are using our app, are using our features, and consider those features to be cutting edge and industry leading, as opposed to something that their parents would have used 20 years ago.
Well, Akshay, I appreciate you joining us. So I'm going to end with sort of like the forward-looking piece of this, which we said we wouldn't talk about at the beginning, but I want to talk about now. Let's acknowledge that our industry's been thrown upside down by COVID, that there's a lot of anticipation and anxiousness about when people will be able to go back to the venues. In your position, thinking about what you need to do from a partnership or technology perspective, given that we are in a global, health pandemic, what do you prioritize? What do you do next? Like, where's your head and where do you put your energy and your focus?
Yeah, so we've spent a lot of time thinking about that, as you can imagine, over the last 6 months, 5 months. Start to lose count of months over the course of this pandemic. But I think a couple of things. One, we have been trying to be as supportive as possible and as communicative as possible towards and with our partners that we just talked about. One of the benefits of being official partners with all these content rights holders is that we can be there to help them and they can be there to help us as we strive to work together. And so that's included things like, for example, there's going to be a handful of NFL teams that have fans at their first games in a few weeks. We have worked with the NFL to ensure social distancing protocols are put into place at these venues as it pertains to ticket sales, as it pertains to how groups can sit next to each other, and where people are allowed to sell and purchase tickets relative to other groups to ensure these social distancing protocols are put into place, to ensure that our tickets are clearly marked and labeled with specific instructions as it relates to COVID-19 protocols that are specific to each venue, because each venue operates in a different city, a different county, a different state, and has completely separate regulations, as we've seen over the course of the last 5 months. So that has been a core use of our time and resources that we think has been incredibly productive, and hopefully we have been able to work with our partners productively to ensure that as they, the content rights holders, who are ultimately putting on these live events, as they go through the really hard work, right? They're the ones doing the majority of the lifting here, that we can help fill in the gaps, we can help plug the holes, we can help be there to support them as we can. The other thing that we have been hyper-focused on during this time is something that we talked about earlier, which is the x-axis of your chart. This is a time to invest in technological advancement, right? We seldom do businesses have the opportunity to take a step back, get off the hamster wheel of constantly having to operate at full capacity, and be able to reallocate resources towards building for the future. The pandemic has given many organizations that find themselves in a secure financial position, which we are fortunate enough to be in. The pandemic has given these organizations the ability to do that. It's truly a once in a lifetime opportunity, obviously, in addition to all of the downsides that the pandemic has brought with it. And so we have been hyper-focused on building out and working on the next set of technological advancements so that when live events do come back with fans safely in the building, those fans, whether they are buyers or sellers, continue to think of us as being best in class as it relates to our efforts in ensuring that they have the most frictionless experience possible. And so we will unveil some of those technological advancements over the course of time in the coming weeks and months. Some of them I've talked about, some of them I will keep under wraps for now. But that has been a critical component as we have thought about how best to invest our time and resources during this relative downtime for our business. And we hope that those will pay dividends when our buyers and sellers on both sides of our marketplace see how we have worked hard to continue to make this process more seamless.
Well, we know that when fans don't show up, there's all kinds of lost revenue across the ecosystem. So the focus that you guys put on that piece of the experience is obviously not underrated from a number of our customers and partners. So I appreciate you taking time to join us today, talk about what StubHub is doing, and talk about what's coming next. Is there anything that you would leave our clients, our audience with when it comes to the types of partnerships you're looking for? Who should be reaching out to you? Is it the Ubers and Lyfts of the world because maybe doing transportation partnerships are interesting? Is it the content partnerships that are possible now because you guys want to be doing more short form video, highlights, things like that? Where would you say, like, on your short list of potential new opportunities, you'd like to see some inbound requests?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Josh. Josh, I would say all of the above. Anyone involved in the process of getting a fan from out of their door back into their door, right?
Okay. So what's your phone number? Should they just call you, or
they can definitely reach out to me. I'm happy to give my email address. But anyone involved in the process of, again, fan from door to door. And so you brought up Uber and Lyft. We've had conversations with folks in the ride sharing space and will continue to do so as it relates to solving a common fan complaint, which is like getting to arenas is a pain sometimes, depending on where they live, where the arena is. A lot of arenas, a lot of venues are not close to urban areas. And oftentimes there can be issues around traffic and driving and drinking and a whole host of issues. So ride sharing is a great example of that. I would say any and all content rights holders, we're always talking to and we're happy to talk to. But there are so many different aspects in addition to ride sharing. There's access control. There's entertainment in venue. There's food and beverage either at the venue or before or after. And so anyone who sees themselves as being part of the ecosystem of getting folks to live events, entertaining them while they're at the live event, and then getting them back home from the live event, and then ensuring that they want to come back over and over again. My phone, my email, always welcome.
Awesome. All right, Akshay, appreciate it.